Skip, no, it did not, because the fact of the matter remains the same for me. That didn't move the needle. It was a fantastic performance by Lamar Jackson at a time his team needed it. It was a statement game late in the season in December. You got to give him all the credit in the world. But the 5 touchdowns in this game against the Miami Dolphins, as crazy as it sounds, Skip, are almost as many as he had in the months of both September and November combined. In those months combined, he had 6 touchdowns passing. And so when you look at the full picture, I just don't see it. And again, people argue with me and they're like, man, you're just hating. I don't see how I'm hating. I'm just laying out the facts of the matter. If
you're
he had
not hating.
30
I'll
touchdowns.
be the first to say you're not hating. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah,
I think he's a fantastic. I thought that was an unbelievable game. I thought he played really well against San Francisco. I think he's having a really good season. It's just when he had his MVP season, and it was unanimous, so you got to put an asterisk next to that because it was so outstanding that he was the first unanimous MVP in the history of the league. But he had 36 touchdown passes. Yeah. And then you look at him having 24 this year. He had 1,200 rushing yards. You look at it, he has about 843 or so this year. And so I don't see it as the same in that respect. And people are like, well, he should get MVP because of what? If the numbers aren't there, then there's not much to say. People were like, they were comparing it to the Peyton Manning season of 2008. I mean, that season he had 6 fourth-quarter comebacks. He led the league in QBR. There were things that happened late in that year that kind of pushed him over the top, but the stats weren't necessarily there. And again, that was 15 years ago. If I look at the last 20 MVPs of the National Football League, 3 of them being running backs, you had all-day Adrian Peterson, who had 2,000 yards. You had LaDainian with 31 total touchdowns. You had Sean Alexander with 28 total touchdowns. But outside of that, it's been quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks, there's only been 3, and 2 of them were co-MVPs in 2003, and that was Steve McNair and Peyton Manning. They had 29 total touchdowns for Steve McNair, 28 for Peyton, and they were co-MVPs. And then you have the 2008 Peyton season where he had 28 total touchdowns. And that's it. Everybody else had above 30 touchdowns. And so if you're going to tell me there was an MVP 20 years ago, they shared it, and then Peyton Manning 15 years ago, out of all the quarterbacks that have won it, and that's it, nobody else has had less than 30 touchdowns in the last decade, in the last 2 decades, then I'm going to say I would assume they would stick to that pattern. So I guess, Skip, but he's the betting favorite. So there's a chance he gets it, but I think it'll be one of them situations where they have to split it because he has under 30 touchdowns. So they split it like they did in 2003 with Steve McNair and Peyton, likely giving it to CMC or Tyreek and Lamar because, I guess that's what they're going to do because otherwise I just don't understand it.
Okay, just for the record, if you had a vote right here, right now, it would go to
Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, 1 vote for no split vote. You just give it to Christian.
I'd split it if that's what we had to do. I mean, it's closer than it was before he had 5 touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah.
He had 5 touchdowns this week.
Right.
And recency, it counts to a degree, but you also have to put the full scope of the picture. So I have to give him credit for what he did against the San Francisco 49ers in a primetime game with the world watching. Right. Played fantastic. And then what he just did against Miami with the number 1 seed on the line, he played his best football and executed. So I do have to factor that in. And his yardage, his rushing, his impact.
And by the way, before you go, Michael, Christian didn't have much of a game at Washington yesterday, but he did tweak I think it was his calf. They said it wasn't a big deal, but I think mid-3rd quarter, he didn't play much the rest of the way, if at all. I think he didn't go back in at all. So his numbers were not huge. He didn't have MVP caliber numbers at Washington, for what that's worth.
No.
Okay, go, Mike.
Right now, and listen. When I was home the other day, when you guys were on this, it was just a great day. I was sitting home. I enjoyed the conversation.
Richard
when I got
Keyshawn.
to work.
Yep.
Yeah, I got to work. I told Key, I said, it was so funny when Key told Sherm, all right, Sherm, go ice your face now because we beat you up a little bit. And they both started laughing at the end. It was all funny. It was great. I couldn't wait to get a chance to have this discussion. Because I was with Sherm on this, Sherm, because Sherm was talking about this. Sherm said, you guys can't just keep coming up and saying, this is the game to determine the MVP. It's the combination of the whole season. It's not this one game who outduel each other in this one game, even though we do that. We do that. You know what I mean? I understood what you meant because it was the Brock Purdy's and the Lamar Jacksons, like right there battling. And since they got a chance to be head-to-head, everybody's going to measure them and say, now he's the leader. You know what I mean? But it's a whole season, not just that one game. So I was with you on that, Sherm. Now, and I think they heard you talking about his numbers. They look like they were directing at getting him some passing touchdowns.
I think so.
I think they heard you. Right. I was like, they heard him. They gonna help him. And then right after the game, they all were hollering MVP.
They were.
MVP. Like them 5 touchdowns. Now we can do it, Sherm. We good. So I was like, okay, I see. They saw this too. But I would also add to 2019 when he got that unanimous MVP, this dude was phenomenal. See, we get caught up in the dynamic, too. We get caught up in that thing that, oh, my God, we ain't never see that. Remember some of the runs he made that season from a quarterback position? We were saying even Michael Vick didn't make those kind of runs. And Michael Vick was the joystick on your football game. You know what I mean? So we said Michael Vick didn't make those kinds of runs. So we got caught up in that. But what we don't get caught up in is the consistency that he's displayed this year. The consistency for his football team. Those numbers. All 16 games, he's had his team in the lead in the last 2 minutes. The only other time that has happened was those 7 Patriots, and you know what kind of season those 7 Patriots had. So what we're saying is late in the season, late in the game, when other guys are throwing late touchdowns, garbage touchdowns, sometimes games they are losing touchdowns. Lamar Jackson didn't have to do that because he had managed and mastered his team and that game the earlier on in that game, so he wasn't caught up trying to catch up. So I give him credit for that. That's not something we talk about giving MVPs, but it's certainly something we should be talking about giving MVPs, because if you can keep your team in the league in the last 2 minutes of every game, you're going to win a lot of those games. And obviously, they won 13 of them so far, the last 16. So they're winning a lot of those games. Right now, with all that we have, and remember my measurement and distance traveled, when we're coming from, these guys didn't even know if they were going to be working together last year. And Lamar Jackson has a whole new offense. Okay. I'm just seeing the early stages of this right now. That's why I started going crazy when I saw him sitting in the pocket so long, because when you put that and tap that into what he has running, then that is dangerous, and he is having an MVP season. That's why he's my MVP right now.
Okay. So, Richard, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about this because if you will remember, before the season started, I picked the Ravens to win it all, to win the Super Bowl, and it was because my logic was I believe Lamar, coming off the contractual nightmare he went through last year, now that it's solved, I thought he was going to bounce back and win MVP, his second this year. And you can argue he got off to a fairly slow start, and your stats are dead on accurate about back to those couple of months. There were a lot of drop balls, but he lost Mark Andrews, obviously. He lost 2 really good running backs. He was in the Todd Monken offense that was brand new to him. And all I know is down the stretch, if we look at the last 3 weeks, if you look at how he took over and controlled games at Jacksonville when I thought they were legit, they won 23-7 at Jacksonville, and obviously they went to the 49ers and just destroyed them on their turf. And then that thing happened yesterday to Miami. And I thought early on that without Kyle Hamilton in the secondary for the Ravens, then they lost Marlon Humphrey right off in like the first couple of series, and they didn't have Brandon Stevens on top of that at corner. And I thought this is going to be a shootout, and Lamar's going to have to be really MVP great today. It didn't turn out that way, but it was like Lamar was playing it like it was a shootout, and he put up shootout numbers for his team that Tua was not able to match, even against that battered Ravens secondary. So when I look at the body of work, how again, we go back and forth about eye test. My eye test just tells me that Lamar rose above this NFL season and just took it over. But it's not all statistics. You have to carefully watch it. And what is your sort of subconscious telling you? That the most valuable player in all of football, especially because of what he did to McCaffrey and Brock Purdy and Kyle on their field, that he was the MVP. And I think he's going to win it in a runaway. I don't know if he'll be unanimous, but I think it'll be close to unanimous just because of the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, and if that's the case, Skip, then that changes the precedent for how they vote for the award. It would. And the same thing that makes you laugh will make you cry later, because there will be a time where Lamar has the stats similar to his unanimous MVP season, and then somebody will be talking about these intangibles. Maybe they won't have the #1 record in the AFC, and somebody else, they'll be like, it's the eye test, it's the eye test, it's this, it's that, but the numbers aren't there. And then there will be Baltimore fans screaming from the mountaintops that this is dead wrong because Lamar has the numbers. And so that's where I don't know if they can set this precedent. And, well, I mean, I guess they can. They can do whatever they want.
They can.
But if you set this precedent, then you set it for the future. And then you start to make it very muddy for the future, in that the numbers don't matter. And so if the numbers don't matter, then what does? Then, because everything else is speculation. Everything else is conjuncture. Everything else is an opinion. Like, the eye test is a subjective matter. My eyes see different than yours. You may have 20/40, and I got 20/20. Skip, that's subjective. I can't see it how you see it. But the things that aren't debatable, that aren't negotiable, are the numbers, the concrete numbers that you put down on the field. And that's why they've used it every year to help determine this award. And you rarely ever see a situation where the MVP isn't leading the league in at least one category. Even Peyton's year, he led it in QBR. The last couple years, the quarterbacks have led it in touchdowns. Majority of the time, they have led it in touchdowns. And so right now he's 10th in passing touchdowns.
Richard, he's leading the league in one category right now, and it's 13-3, right? That's all he's got they're 13-3.
That's a team stat.
Yeah, I understand.
That's a team stat. You can't give me a team stat and say he's leading it when they have the #1 defense in sacks, takeaways, scoring.
They do.
Like, I hear what you're saying, but that's a complete team. Or otherwise, you're spitting in the face of this defense and saying, hey, they're not doing anything for these wins. They're not making an impact or a difference, and that's not true.
Okay, go, Michael.
Well, but everybody on the team is making a great impact and making a difference. But we tend to give quarterbacks more due when things are going great. We tend to give them a little bit more bad when things are going not so great. So that's the reality of it. But Sherm, you bring up a point that we are witnessing. We are witnessing things change at the quarterback position. We are witnessing different ways that position now produces yards and touchdowns. So yeah, it used to be all about the passing touchdown, but now we're getting the duo threat quarterbacks, the real duo threat quarterbacks, not athletes playing quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Not a guy that's really a runner that we turned into a quarterback. We're getting quarterbacks that can really run. And that's what Lamar Jackson has really turned into. Before, you could have said he was joking about, I'm a running back. He not so joking. But you know what I mean? Man, you are a running back trying to throw. But now this dude's a real quarterback and that can run. And that's the difference. And I do believe those numbers are going to change because people are going to see this kind of effectiveness. Jalen Hurts open it up. So how can you start having those guys in the Super Bowl like last season and start saying, well, how did he get his team to the Super Bowl? He's not even in the MVP conversation only because he threw for 26 touchdowns, 25 touchdowns, and ran for another 8, 9 touchdowns. You know what I mean? So you're going to get those numbers there as the game moves, and the game is moving.
Yeah, good point.
I feel that, but I've seen 2 mobile quarterbacks win the award. And so those quarterbacks had 35 for Cam Newton. Killer won it in 2015 with 35 passing touchdowns, 10 rushing touchdowns. Lamar himself won it with 36 passing touchdowns to 7 rushing touchdowns, 43 total. So we've seen it done by him specifically, by another mobile type quarterback in Cam Newton. And the numbers, again, were a lot more than that. That were 45 total touchdowns for Cam, 43 for Lamar. So again, those points are why I'm saying this is just one of those years where if it went I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, Richard, last question just for you. You said your vote would go to Christian McCaffrey. How much, remember, Brock Purdy has been, I don't know, most of the weeks of this year, the majority of this year, Brock Purdy was the favorite to win MVP. How much has C-Mac benefited from Brock Purdy? How much would they cancel each other out, along with Kyle's offense, along with his scheme, benefiting both of them? How much of that would cancel each other out, both Brock and C-Mac under Kyle?
I'm not sure. That's up to the voters. That's a great question, though, Skip. I think after his performance against the Baltimore Ravens, whether the interceptions were his fault or whether they weren't, it still happened. It was a 4-interception game. Yep. I think that would dissuade some voters and really put the onus on Christian McCaffrey. And I think that's why the betting odds are the way they are, with Christian McCaffrey second in those. I think Tyreek being hurt for one of the games, the last 3 games, and then having under 100 yards for the last 2 will affect that. And so I think if somebody's going to vote for the San Francisco 49ers player, I think it's going to be Christian McCaffrey, just because of how that game went for Brock Purdy.
Thanks for watching, Undisputed fans. Do you want more highlights from the show? Make sure to click that subscribe button for all the exclusive content from Undisputed.